Hello, hello, Sarah of SDK Handmade here, and today I'm going to share with you how to work a Russian join. Let's go. To practice the Russian join, you are going to need 2 skeins of yarn. These can just be practice yarn. If you're working this in a project, then you're going to have the skein that you started with, which is probably attached to your work, as well as the new skein that you're joining in. But just for practice, they can be any leftover yarn that you have. I'm doing it in 2 colors just to show you really clearly what's going on with each end of the yarn. You're also going to need a pair of scissors and a blunt tip tapestry needle. I don't recommend this being a sharp tip as A, you're more likely to stab yourself, and B, it's just not necessary. So to get started, you need your tapestry needle and the 2 ends of the yarns that you're going to join together. Let's say that my gray yarn this is the tail end of my ball of yarn and all of that is attached to my project. So we're going to start with that. I'm going to go ahead and thread my tapestry needle. The way that I do this is I just wrap the end of my yarn over the eye of my needle. I pinch it between my thumb and finger, slip it off the end, and I've got a little bump of yarn there. And then I just roll the tapestry needle over it. And that's a really easy way to get all of your plies through the tapestry needle on the first go. You want to leave yourself a little tail here to use to pull through the yarn, which I'm going to show you in just a second here. Then you're going to take your tapestry needle and you're just going to start weaving it in and out of the plies of your yarn. I guess I should say that this is probably not the most successful to use with a single ply yarn. You're going to want a yarn that has some plies to it so that you can weave in and out between them. So you're going to take the length of yarn that we're pretending is attached to my project or that you're just practicing with, and we're going to fold our tapestry needle over. And we're just going to start going in and out of the different plies of our yarn, kind of back and forth, grabbing a few of the plies on either side of the needle. What we're doing is we're running through the center of the yarn, and we're eventually going to pull this bit of yarn back through the end, making a little loop here. So this takes some practice. I have to admit that I don't use the Russian join very often, and so I'm not maybe a super pro at this. But there are people who can get the yarn to pretty much disappear. You want to go down your yarn a good amount. The longer you go down your yarn, the more secure your end is going to be. And so we want it to be secure. The last thing you want is your project falling apart at this join. So once you've gotten through your plies, just to be on the safe side, I would take your next yarn and just loop it through there. You have plenty of yarn because remember, this is going to be your new ball of yarn. So just give a nice long loop through there so that you can drop it and it's not a problem because we want that yarn secured in there. Then you're just going to, I just grab all of that yarn that's on my tapestry needle and kind of hold it in place and pull my tapestry needle through those plies of yarn. This looks messy. That's okay. Don't stress about it. So I'm going to pull and then make sure I grab my tail and let it come all the way through. You could, if you would like to go further at this point, now that you've pulled through, you could continue going back and forth through your plies to make sure that it's just even maybe a little more secure, and then pull through again. And then just pull your tapestry needle out. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab my yarn and I'm going to straighten all of that out. All this is it's just squished up on that yarn. So I'm just going to straighten it out, and you can see how it locks my tail in between those plies. Is it absolutely perfect? No. You can see that spot that I went a little too far is a little floofier. That's totally my fault. You can see where I was more careful in going back and forth. It's pretty well hidden in there. And then I want to take my end and just make sure that this loop at the end here is pulled nice and tight. And you can see I can yank on that nice and hard and it's not coming undone. Just out of personal preference, before I trim this end, I'm going to do this side because I can go backwards at this point, but once I trim my end, especially if you're working on a project, you're going to be kind of stuck. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to thread my new yarn on my tapestry needle. This would be the time to adjust this. If you're like, this is way too much yarn, you can adjust by pulling it back and forth through that loop that you created with the other yarn. So if you need to be, a little more careful with your yarn because you might run out, or if you want to have extra yarn here, you can do that too. And then I'm going to start just kind of right close to my loop here. You can tighten this so you don't have to be right close. Don't stress about that. And then I'm just going to go in and out of my plies again. And wrap it around and back and forth. I'm not trying to break my plies at all. I'm not trying to split them. I'm just trying to go kind of in between. And this is an acrylic yarn, so it's more slippery. It's maybe a little harder to use this for, but now that I have my yarn all bunched up on there, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab the bunched up yarn. I'm going to pull gently through with my tapestry needle, and this yarn was shorter, so that was nice and easy. And then again, I'm going to tighten my yarn so that my loop is nice and tight. And then I can either keep going with this or take my tapestry needle off and then just straighten this out. And all of that yarn is caught there. And now, before I trim my ends, I want to give this a really nice good tug. Not too hard if your yarn is fragile, but you can see that since this is acrylic yarn, I can give it a really good tug and those aren't coming apart. And then I can just trim my ends right close to the yarn. Be careful not to cut your yarn or you'll have to start all over again. And then you're nice and secure. Now, you can see that this part of my yarn where I did the Russian join is a little thicker than the normal yarn. This is something that will stress some people out, but I gotta tell you, once this gets worked in, the likelihood is that you're not going to see this any more than you would see when you've woven an end back in. Because if we look really carefully where we weave an end in, it also can be seen just a little bit. Let's talk about when a great time to use a Russian join is and when it's maybe not the best fit. To work a Russian join, you are going to want a yarn that has plies. This is a good example of applied yarn. It makes it really easy to see the different plies because they are different colors. So you can see each of those little loops right there is a ply of yarn. And so you're going to work in between those to do your Russian join. Maybe not the best fit for a Russian join would be a single ply yarn like this. You can see that that's just one strand of yarn that has been twisted. Now on something as thick as this, you might still be fine, but especially on finer yarns, you're just going to end up probably breaking your yarn or having it end up looking really messy. This is also maybe not the best fit for a project where you need to change colors at a really specific point. It can be hard to place this at exactly the right point to change colors, but this is a great way to change colors if you're working on a scrappy project where you don't necessarily need an exact color change, or if you're adding two skeins of the same color together. And that's how you work a Russian join. I hope you find lots of great places to use this technique to limit the number of ends that you have to weave in always a personal goal of mine. It is always also my goal to help you grow confidently in your craft. If you found this video helpful, I would love it if you would like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any tutorials in the future. I thank you so much for joining me today, and happy crafting!